Good evening and welcome to Your Idaho, where we discuss issues facing our state and its citizens. This program is brought to you by the GemStatePatriot.com, an Idaho-based electronic newsletter. My name is Bob Neugebauer. I'm the publisher of the Gem State Patriot. My co-host this evening is Kevin Miller of the Kevin Miller Show, 580 KIDO, and a distinguished winner of the Marconi Award. Tonight we are pleased to have with us A.J. Balukoff, Democratic candidate for governor, and I thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Well, Bob, thanks for inviting me to be here.
Well, we're looking forward to some discussion on several contentious issues, so to speak.
Okay.
First, I'd like to ask you how you're going to go about dealing with a legislature that's going to be over two-thirds Republican, and how are you going to reach across the aisle to these officials?
Well, Bob, I've been down to the legislature for the past 17 years as a school board trustee, testifying and talking about education bills. And so I know a lot of the legislators that are down there. I've known several of them in other settings, business and so forth. And as part of my campaign, as I've traveled around the state, I've tried to make it a point to call on legislators that I don't know. And I've visited with them. And I believe that our legislators really want to do what's best for the people of Idaho, when they want to do what's best for our school children. And I believe we'll be able to work together. I'm not running to further a partisan agenda. I truly want to get our schools moving in the right direction, and I want to help our economy improve and create good paying jobs. And I think those are the goals that our legislators have. I think as we work toward common goals, we'll be able to work together and gather allies to get the things done that we need to get done.
Well, you're going to have a difficult time with some of these people, but at least you're on the right track and you're willing to reach across that aisle.
Sure.
Sometimes we've seen that hasn't happened with some of our governors. There's been a lot of talk in the media about the CCA scandal, just as of late, and I know Kevin has had some of this comment on his show.
Exactly.
This has to do with the campaign contributions of $20,000 to Governor Otter from the CCA people, and the fact that this problem that they had was kept open for a year before they decided to do some investigation. But that's not the first one. That's just the first of many scandals, because we've gone through the E&A contract with the Tennessee firm, with lower bids we've had here in Idaho for the same contract. We've gone through it with Quest Syringa, where we had a problem with the feds holding $14 million back. And also the healthcare exchange contract was given out to a California firm. And I guess my question to you is, there's very little transparency that goes on with these contracts. And I'd like to know how you're going to deal with that, and whether you're going to take a look at the Idaho companies that can do these contracts, because you say you want to build the Idaho companies. I'd like to know how you're going to do this, and how you're going to be transparent, or more transparent than we have been over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, all of the state's business should be an open book for people to look at and know exactly what's happening. The governor and his staff in the various departments are really servants of the people, and we are answerable to the people of Idaho and not to campaign donors or other people. We need to let people know what we're doing and why we're doing things, and we let contracts out. There's state law that's supposed to govern the issuance of contracts. In the Boise School District, we've been subject to those laws, and we are very careful about making sure that we follow the law and award the contract in accordance with state law. Now, I would really like to see some of those contracting laws changed so that we could give advantages to Idaho companies. And the reason is, if the dollars stay in Idaho, they circulate in our economy and help build our economy. Whereas if we're giving money to a Tennessee firm, for example, at least the profits are going back to Tennessee, and they're helping the Tennessee economy and not the Idaho economy. So I think it'd be a good change to be able to award extra points or something to an Idaho-based company, where the profits would stay here in Idaho and be reinvested in our economy.
You would just do that by changing the rules. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if you could do that by just changing the rules or not. Or if, I think it's better to work through the legislature and work together. I don't know who would be opposed to giving Idaho companies an advantage and keeping dollars in our state to circulate in our economy.
Well, that's been our question for some time here, is why our Idaho companies have not had an opportunity to bid on these things.
Well, they've had an opportunity to bid. You know, we had Idaho companies bidding on the broadband contract, but they just didn't get the award. And from what I've seen, it looked like it was a structured deal from the beginning, and ENA was going to get the contract no matter what.
I tend to agree with you from everything I've read so far. Kevin, you've been through some of this stuff. What do you think about it?
Well, you know, the question I have for AJ is, we're less than a week away. You've put your life on hold. How do you, why would you do this, the crazy world of politics? And how do you see the election playing out here?
Well, why I would do this, you know, most people don't get an opportunity like this. And the opportunity was presented to me, and I was attracted to do this first just because of the platform it gives me to talk about education and what we need to do to get our schools on the right track, producing kids that are prepared to succeed beyond high school. That was attractive to me. As I've gotten into this race, 11 months now, traveling around the state, I'm hearing that same desire from people all over the state, that they want our schools to be a top priority, or the top priority, and they want them to be funded properly, they want teachers to be respected. So I've accomplished that goal. And because of what we've been doing, and because of the way circumstances have worked out, I've got a real chance of actually winning this election. Now, it's going to be close, and we won't know until Tuesday night how it plays out.
But do you feel good?
But I feel confident and optimistic.
You know, we have a lot of negative ads, and certainly about you. Let's give you a chance here on the Tea Party Bob show to respond to it. People are saying, you know, AJ, what's his name? He's buying the election. You've invested quite a lot of your own money. In this age of apathy, that you've spent your own money says something about the character and your commitment. What do you say to people that say, oh, he's buying the election?
Well, you know, I'm not, I mean, that's a cynical way to look at it, that I'm buying the election. Susie and I have always felt it was important to be a part of the community, to contribute to the community, and we've contributed financially to a lot of community service organizations, charities and nonprofits and so forth. I see this as another form of community service. And, you know, I don't have big special interest groups giving me lots of money. The people that are donating to my campaign are giving small amounts generally. I've got a few donors who have given $5,000, but not many. At last count, I had over 2,400 individual donors contributing to me. But I've put in the lion's share of the money because you need a certain amount of money to do your advertising, to pay the expenses, and I felt it was important to run a credible campaign. So that's why I put my money into it. I found it really interesting, and the big surprise to me was all of the negative advertising that's coming from out of state. The Republican Governors Association out of Washington, D.C. is putting $500,000 into the Idaho economy, which I guess is good news.
Right.
But the bad news is they're spending that money to tell lies about me. There's really only, as I've looked at those ads, there's only one thing that's accurate in them, and that's that I'm in favor of Medicaid expansion. But beyond that, everything else is a total falsehood. And I'm just surprised that how people are willing to just give just bald-faced lies in order to win an election. And I wonder why they're doing that. If they want Governor Otter to serve a third term, why aren't they spending their money to tell us why he deserves a third term?
You have to have something to tell.
Well,
And if you don't have anything to tell, then that's very telling, so to speak. I applaud you for spending your own money.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people who would do that.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of money coming in from the outside Democratic sources.
I'm getting no help from
Right.
from the Democratic Party, the National Party, or the Democratic Governors Association. It's all my support is from people inside of Idaho, with the exception of a couple of my kids who don't live in the state who have contributed a little bit to my campaign.
So we can say you're your own man as far as this campaign goes.
That-
I
that's
feel
correct.
good that we have somebody doing that. I don't feel bad about it.
Okay.
I'd like to get to something that keeps coming up in the commercials. It has to do with taxes. Now, you've said
Okay.
you're not going to raise taxes.
Well, Bob, let me clarify something.
Okay.
Let me clarify something here. That question about are you going to raise taxes really does a disservice to the government classes kids have in high school. The governor does not have the authority to raise taxes.
Right.
That happens in the House of Representatives. So, some of the false advertising indicates that I'm going to raise taxes. Well, the governor doesn't have the authority to raise taxes. He can't do it. I mean, even if I wanted to. And before you'd ever raise taxes, you got to eliminate waste, and you've got to change priorities. That's what I would do, is eliminate the waste that we see in our state government, the inefficiencies, and I would change priorities to make education the top priority.
So we've dispelled the myth of raising taxes. I've got another question just on taxes. Would you be for pushing through the elimination of the grocery tax, which basically hurts the middle class, the lower class, and the seniors of this state?
Our state has made the awkward attempt by using the grocery tax credit to exempt groceries. At best, that's an estimate of what you may have spent on groceries, and that may have been the sales tax on groceries you purchased during the year.
Well, in my case, that's not even close.
And that's what I say. At best, it's an estimate, and in a lot of cases, the thing you can probably guarantee is that for most people, it's not accurate. But that was put in place before we had the technology we have today.
Right.
With everything in the grocery store is barcoded, and they run it through the check register with the barcode. They control inventory with the barcode. I'll bet their software already has a field for whether or not an item is taxable. We could outright exempt groceries and not even collect it at the grocery store.
See, and the contention against doing that is because they would lose $60 million in revenue from outsiders who are coming in here, buying the groceries and paying the tax. In other words, people from out of state who are coming here to visit.
Well, that I don't know what that number is, but the larger issue in my mind is taxing groceries for people who are struggling to make ends meet. The senior citizens on fixed income, the working poor who, by the way, are showing up at the food banks in greater numbers than they ever have in the history of our state. But that's where we need to help people is let's talk about helping our citizens and exempt groceries and not collect tax on groceries.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I know there's a lot of people wanted to know how you felt about it.
Yeah.
What tax alternatives would you consider to draw new companies into Idaho? Maybe like getting rid of the state income tax and raising the sales tax, which is basically a consumption tax, or eliminating the personal property tax, which is what they've been trying to do here, or even alternatives to a state gas tax. What would you be looking at?
Bob, I don't think I would try to attract companies with tax breaks like that. It hasn't proved to be very successful for Governor Otter. I think it'd be more important to concentrate our efforts on helping existing Idaho companies grow and thrive, especially the companies that pay good, livable wages. I've talked to a number of companies around the state that tell me that they would expand if, and there's always some kind of an if, and a lot of cases it's they can't find the graduates from our colleges that are qualified to do the kind of work that the companies want to do. I spoke with a high-tech company in Nampa who is expanding, but they're not expanding in Idaho, although they'd like to, because they can't find the graduates with the skills and the knowledge they need. They can find those graduates in Indiana, so their company is expanding in Indiana instead of Idaho. Well, it seems like we ought to be working with our colleges, universities, and College of Western Idaho to make sure that these kids that graduate in a technology field have the correct knowledge and skills so that companies like this one in Nampa can expand here in Idaho and create good jobs. I think that would be a lot more effective than giving tax breaks to bring in companies from outside of Idaho to compete with Idaho existing businesses.
Well, I think that's something that Russ Fulcher also emphasized is also the education part and matching that up with the industries. I mean, Kevin goes down to the schools all the time and sees what's going on there. And, you know, from what I hear from him, the kids are doing well in the high schools, but...
Well, here's the issue. What about the textbook issue? You know this in the Boise schools. People don't get to take home the textbooks. They have to sign those out like we did with library books. I mean, and the Boise School District is doing well off compared to others. And it was kind of interesting during the debate. The governor kind of was trying to, you know, paint Boise against the rest of the state, I thought, kind of like Boise envy. But you have a lot of hardworking folks that, like you, put money out of their own pockets so their kids can get a world-class education. But what about the textbook issue? Shouldn't every kid in Idaho have a textbook they can bring home?
Well, they should, and that's a symptom of how underfunded our schools are. If we had proper funding, we could keep current with our textbooks, and we could have a textbook for every child they could take home and read at home and do homework at home. When you have to check the book out, that's because there's a limited supply, and some kids are not going to be able to check out the book.
What do you say to conservatives, though, that say we're spending too much money on education? There's no ROI. I mean, we almost had a fisticuffs at the Chick-fil-A thing over education. That's how much, as you know, and Tea Party Bob knows, people care about education.
It's a huge issue here.
Well, people do care about education, but it is underfunded in Idaho. There's no question about that. Our teachers, the starting salaries for Idaho teachers are the lowest in the entire 11 western states. Superintendents all over the state tell me that they lose their teachers to surrounding states, where they can go and make $5,000 to $15,000 a year more than they're making here in Idaho, and they have difficulty filling teaching vacancies. I talked to a superintendent just this week who said half of the teachers in that district are on provisional certifications. That means they're not certified teachers yet.
Right.
They're working towards it.
How can you do that? Usually you have to be certified
You do,
to teach.
but if you can't
It's
fill a
that bad.
position, if you can't fill a position, you're allowed to temporarily fill it with someone with a provisional certificate.
Wow.
Well,
And-
the next question is obvious, is tiered licensure that the legislature is talking about now. How is that going to affect what's happening here if they actually do get this through? Because I can see teachers leaving the state in droves.
Well, I've had teachers tell me that if the tiered licensure proposal goes through in its current form, they're going to retire at the end of this school year. I've had superintendents tell me that they see this as another obstacle to recruit and retain teachers.
Well, that's just vilifying teachers is what that is. That's an old thing from 20 years ago in Ohio. You know, and both of you value education, but look at how frustrating it is, okay? We promise that we're going to fix the bad teachers. We put in the NTE under Bush. Then it's No Child Left Behind. Then it's Common Core. Then it's this. Then it's that. And all we're doing is isolating the people that are there for the kids. I mean,
Right.
the tiered certification, it's still not going to get rid of bad teachers.
No, it's not.
But I'm sure you'd like to ask a Common Core question, wouldn't you?
Well, I've got
I don't want to
two-
lead the witness.
I know, but I have two quick questions because I've interviewed with you before, and two things you did mention: that you're not for the SBAC test, and that you don't like the longitudinal test data going out to the government because it's way too much. I'd like to know, number one, how you feel about that now, if you feel the same way, and if the legislature decided to get rid of Common Core, which is at their purview, would you be in agreement with that?
Well, first let me answer the question about the SBAC test. You know, that test is way too long, and it ties up the computer labs, because most of our schools have one computer lab, and so that means each class has to take turns taking that test. And that stretches that test out over an extended period of time in the spring. It competes with the advanced placement test, it competes with the SAT test and other things. If we're going to keep the SBAC test, it needs to be shortened drastically, at least in half. And I don't know if they can do that, but that's why I'm not a fan of the SBAC test. It's way too long. And so far, and I know it's just been a test program, it hasn't given much meaningful feedback to the teachers.
Well, the teachers aren't even allowed to know what's on the program
Right.
because they haven't been able to look at the computer to see the questions.
Right.
And a lot of the questions, from what we understand, are psychometric questions.
Yeah.
Basically looking at the psychology of the child.
Yeah. And I don't know that. I've not looked at the questions either. I just know that an 8-hour test for a third grader is way too long.
Right.
That's why I don't like that test. And as far as collecting the data, I don't know why the federal government needs the data and why it got tied to the Common Core. The original design of the Common Core was to raise the standards, raise the bar, so that our kids were more prepared than they were under the No Child Left Behind standards. And the Common Core standards themselves accomplish that, and they're pretty good. In the Boise School District, we've gone beyond the Common Core. As an example, the Common Core math sequence is designed to get kids to take Algebra 2 in the 12th grade. In our district, we felt like that wasn't good enough to be really successful in college. So our sequence is designed to get kids to calculus in the 12th grade. And that's a higher standard. And if people want to talk about a higher standard than Common Core, I'm very willing to have that conversation. But I don't think the standards ought to be lower than Common Core standards.
See, I look at the standards, and you're talking about algebra in the 12th grade. I took algebra in the 9th grade.
Yeah.
That was normal.
Yeah.
Algebra, geometry, and then you take trig, and then calculus if you happen to be going in that direction.
Yeah.
Some of us took algebra in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Yes.
Some of us did.
I agree. I had my problems there, too. You're a member of the board of St. Luke's.
Yes.
And my question on St. Luke's and about all the hospitals and medical costs here, because they've been rising dramatically over the last 5 years, and insurance policies are rising too. But what would you do to improve the transparency of the procedural costs of operations or different procedures that happen at St. Luke's? Could you do something like they do down in Oklahoma, where they actually open a hospital up, they put all of the procedures on the internet. You can see exactly what it costs, and they've lowered cost to 1/6 to 1/8 of what they are at the other hospitals. Is there a way to do that here? Because you get a hernia operation in Treasure Valley Hospital, it's $2,000. You go to St. Luke's, it's $8,000 plus.
Okay. I think healthcare is moving in the direction of more transparency, and that's good. But let's just take the comparison you did with the Treasure Valley Hospital. That's a pretty stark comparison, but what's not in that is that St. Luke's takes on Medicaid patients where they don't get full reimbursement or full payment for the procedure. They take on people who can't pay, and they write it off as bad debt or charity care. They take Medicare patients. You look at the patient mix at Treasure Valley Hospital, and they are the insured people. They get full price, so they don't have those expenses of taking on the Medicaid patients. Treasure Valley Hospital does not have an emergency room, and emergency rooms in hospitals are departments that lose money. So that means they're subsidized by the departments that are profitable. When you don't have to subsidize the departments that lose money, you can afford to charge lower prices. So besides just comparing prices like that, we ought to also be comparing the reasons behind why a hospital like Treasure Valley Hospital can be so much lower than a hospital like St. Luke's or St. Alphonsus. And it's because of the patient mix and because they don't have departments that lose money.
Well, then we need to find out how to get a breakdown of that and find out what the numbers really are, because I've never seen them. I've looked for them, but I've never seen them. So if you're telling me it's going to cost 4 times more to go to St. Luke's than the Treasure Valley, I would prefer to go to the Treasure Valley. So I do see competition springing up within this state at some point in time, just like direct private care will spring up.
Yeah. And if people have the choice, they will go to the one with the lower price. But if you're a high-risk patient, you can guarantee that the doctors will not put you at Treasure Valley Hospital.
You mean like Kevin and I?
If you're a high-risk patient, you'll go to St. Luke's or St. Alphonsus.
Thank you for that, Tea Party Bob.
Well, I just
appreciate
put
it.
myself in the group too.
No, that's great. Let me ask you something real quick, AJ. You've been pretty harsh on the governor. Your ads saying cronyism, the CCA. Is the governor a bad guy? Has he done something wrong?
No, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. But what this is, an election is when the people of Idaho have the opportunity to do a job performance evaluation on their employee, the governor. And my ads have talked about the results of his performance as the governor. We find ourselves at the bottom in education. We find ourselves at the bottom in the economy and jobs. And we've looked at the ways he's handled contracts where there should have been oversight to those contracts, oversight to the way contracts are let out. And he's failed in that. He's been an absentee governor when there's been a problem with one of his campaign donors.
Is that cronyism?
Well, the way the ENA contract was let out, the way that looks like cronyism because the contract was awarded to a major campaign donor, and it was looks like a structured deal from the start that ENA was going to get that contract no matter what. So that looks like cronyism. The CCA scandal, when that happened and the governor delegated all that to his staff, it looks like he abandoned his responsibilities as the governor. He abdicated.
But if he stayed, wouldn't that be a conflict of interest?
I don't think it would have been. I mean, you can disclose that they were a campaign contributor, but if it looks like your friends or your campaign contributors have cheated the state, it seems like you have even a more serious duty to hold that contractor accountable, and he didn't.
Tea Party Bob, you want to take it away? Or?
No, I mean, I think he's kind of
sounds like what's in the Gem State Patriot all the time.
Yes, it is. I think he put it pretty succinctly. We want more accountability, we want more transparency, and we want more people to take responsibility. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to take the top job, the buck stops there at your desk. And I purposely have asked that question several times and never really gotten an answer. Evidently the buck that they're trying to stop is the one that's out there in the hunting grounds. Yeah. I'd like to know if you're going to make yourself available to alternative media.
Not just regular media, too.
If you are elected, because we've had problems in the past trying to get a hold of...
I think it's very important for public servants to keep the general public, the regular people, informed as to what's going on and how you're governing. And it's important to talk to the media and to whatever you have to define for me what alternative media is.
Well, I'm an alternative media. We get out to about 25,000 households. Okay. And we get out there in social media. We're starting hopefully a new internet radio show. So that's alternative media to me.
Hey, you don't have to be too successful over there, buddy.
Well, I'm trying not to. I promise I will not bother you whatsoever.
Well, please don't get me out of business.
In fact, I'll put you on our show.
I appreciate that. I need some job security. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you very much for coming here this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you very much for coming, Kevin, also.
Good to see you both.
We wish you luck in the election.
Thank you. 1 week to go.
Wherever the chips may fall, they'll fall.
That's right.
But thanks again. We appreciate it.
Well,
thank you very much, Idaho.